Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. This is part two to our relationship deep dive episode. If you are caught up, then you are aware that we split the episode into two different episodes just so that they weren't so long. So part one is about relationships with your friends and your family. And now you're about to hear part two, which is all about your relationship with your spouse or your partner. So yeah, if you are not caught up, I would recommend going back and listening to part one first, and then going into part two, because there's going to be parts that we reference, that we probably mentioned in part one, and you might be a bit confused if you did not listen to that. So yeah, this is our episode on relationships with your partner or your spouse. I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so now the big one, relationships with a partner or spouse.
I'm actually a bit stressed about this one, but it's fine. I live my truth. Before we dive fully into it, one thing I want to say or like give information on is like, I don't think most people, I think Taylor talks a lot about her and Tony's like relationship and its upbringing, but I don't think I've really ever talked about mine and Wally's. Like, I don't think I've ever really said much about it, to be honest. I don't know, maybe I have.
I don't think you
But
really have.
so a little background. I was 17 when I first met Wally. I think he was 21. Yeah, that's the math. He's 4 years older than me. I was in high school. I was a senior. We met at a party. I was actually there with his cousin. It's like a whole thing. But I was super young when I met him. I was in high school. He was like this older guy, kind of started paying attention to me. He was actually in basic training at the time. And he was like home on like Christmas break or something like that. Like that's kind of like when we first like connected as like older people, I guess I would say. And then from there, he went to basic training, came back, and we kind of like talked on MySpace. We started kind of hanging out in the same friend groups, and then it just like kind of evolved from there. But like we were babies. I was for sure a baby. Again, 17. Still in high school. So that's kind of like how long we've been together. We've technically been married for, not great at math here, but I think it's 12 years.
What year did you get married in?
This year will be 12 years.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, because we went to Mexico 2 years ago and that was for your tenure, right?
This year will be 13 years
Yeah.
because I got married in 2011. So we've been married for almost 13 years, and we've been together for like 15, 16, I guess. Again, math's not my strong suit. Anyways, I also do not have like any real family members. I would say like I have my sister Crystal, super close to her, but also like high boundaries. I have a half sister that came into my life when I was like 22.
6?
Actually maybe 23. I was almost pregnant with
Really?
Henley. Yeah. So like,
Oh.
and then I have like another sister that lives around the block. I barely see her. Parents have a dad, lives in Colorado, don't talk to him. Mom lives really close, barely talk to her.
Have
She
a
listens to the
dad.
she listens to the podcast. Hey mom. I see her when I see her. And then I have a brother who's in prison, and I adopted his son. So that's my family dynamic. I have aunts and uncles who hate me, and that's because my grandparents had to raise me from my parents. So they hated us as children. So don't really care for cousins either because they're all really rude to us. And then I've been through a
And they're
million
getting married, so.
kissing cousins. And then I also have a lot of different friend groups that I've like bounced between. But Taylor's been like a real OG. I have a couple that have been like around for quite a while in my adult years, and that's been like really, really nice. But yeah, Wally and I have been through a lot. We've been through sexual traumas, we've been through infidelities, we've been through alcoholism, we've been through both coming from really fucked up families and having no family. Like Wally and I literally have no family. It's just us. So we've been,
Deployments.
yeah, we've been through like a million ups and downs. Addiction's strong in our family bloodline. What else? I don't know. Is there any other history? I'm a Leo. He's a Leo.
She's an
Cancer
Enneagram
runs in
1,
our
he's an
family.
Enneagram 9. I think that's probably it.
I don't know. That was like the really quick and dirty version. That was like an extra dirty martini for sure. But yeah, I feel like I don't touch a lot on like all of that. I think I hint at it sometimes or I like make comments here and there, but like there's so much that goes into all of it. So I wanted you guys to have a little bit of context before I like talked more in depth about like actual marriage and spouse relationships.
I think everybody has a background of Tony and I. I don't know if I need to dive into that. I met Tony when I was 16. We got together when I was 17, got married when I was 18, divorced when I was 24, and then back together when I was 25, and got married again when I was 33.
It's so weird when you say that because like I was just getting pregnant with Henley basically around this time. And in my mind, like when you guys were splitting, it was like I was 17. In my mind, it feels like I was like brand new 17,
Mhm.
just barely became an adult. But like you actually were dealing with all this right as I was becoming a mom, and that's so crazy.
Yeah, and it still makes me sad because I like completely checked out when Shelby was becoming a mom because bitch was a hot damn mess. Bitch is in me, not Shelby. And yeah, I was
I
just
probably was.
not, I was just not a good person. So
I think you were still great. Also the fact that our friendship like lasted through that, a
I
huge testament, I
know,
would say. Like if
I
you have
know.
friendships that can go through some real intense stuff, like that to me is like the ultimate sign of a good friendship. Like if you can be open, honest, and like, hey bitch, I'm dealing with this, and you support them full circle, like that to me, if you don't have one of those, you gotta find one. You gotta find a friend like that.
Yeah. And I feel like Tony and I, like, we've been through a lot in a different way than Shelby and Wally. Like, we've been through the death of my dad, the death of our dog, infidelity, moving hours away from our friends and family. Like, we've been through a lot, but in a different
Mhm.
dynamic, I would say.
I would say that you guys have a lot of different perspectives. Like grief doesn't surround ours. You guys don't have like addictions really following you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys both have families. Like you guys really do have like almost
Mm-hmm.
an opposite spectrum. I have kids, you guys don't. Like
Mm-hmm.
really, we really couldn't be more opposite if you
Yeah,
think about
it's
it.
so true. The only thing we have in common is infidelities.
I was gonna say wine.
And wine.
Wine. Um, But one thing I wanted to like make sure that people understand, which is actually funny because we just were naturally talking about it, is like every relationship is so unique. We all have our own uniqueness, and I don't think it's good to look at other people and like see what they have and be like, why don't we have this? Comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison will ruin a relationship 100%. So like if you're looking at somebody and you're seeing like them posting on social media and you're posting like that they're doing all these amazing things and you're looking at it and you're like, but I don't have this. Something's wrong with my relationship. Like everyone has something unique that's made them their relationship. Like
Hmm.
Wally and I have different baggage than Taylor and Tony have. And like you should never compare your baggage to somebody else. You should never be like, they shouldn't be together. I should have this. Like you're not here to judge other
Hmm.
people's relationships and you're not here to judge your own by comparing it to someone else's. And I think that that's literally the biggest rule that you should have. And I remember in my 20s, like we would all get together as girls because like our last episode said, like we were freaking messes in our 20s. And
Yeah,
we would get together as girls and we would just talk so much
bitch.
shit. Like
Yeah.
we would be saying the meanest things and venting and venting and venting. We all were married very young though. We're all from Utah.
Hmm.
We're married very young and we're like learning how to be in these relationships that we should not have been in. Like
Hmm.
here we all are on this like path now and it's great and everything's worked out, but like we should not have been in these deep dark relationships. Like we were getting drunk off of box wine and bitching and complaining. And I remember, I don't remember like exactly what happened or why it happened. I think I like we had a friend that was like really really good at talking shit about her partner, and I think one day I just kind of was like, this is making me hate my partner more.
Hmm.
This is making me worse. This is making my relationship worse by listening to this, contributing to it. They're using it against me. They're like trying to tell me I shouldn't do this, or they're telling me I shouldn't be here. Like it almost gave them permission to talk about me. and my relationship to other people to tell me how to live my life, and then also was like tainting my relationship. And I think I just woke up and was like, I'm not doing this. And I remember telling Wally, like, we are not going to be those people anymore. I was like, I don't know if you talk shit about me, but I for sure have been talking shit about you, and it's not happening anymore. We support each other to other people. We're kind. We don't have to like say everything's great and amazing, but we're not doing this anymore, and we can deal with our own shit like together. And that was massively pivotal for us.
Yeah. And I think like it's so hard when you're in young marriages because you don't know, you don't have the skills that you just naturally get as you get older to not have those conversations, to communicate better. Like Jaden and her sister's daughter were the age I was when I got married. And I literally look at Jaden and I'm like, if this kid was to get married right now, I swear to God, I'd kill him. Like he is still a baby. And so the fact that like, and our moms had a problem with it. Like, I don't want to make it seem like our moms were just like handing us away to get married and live this life. Like they tried to talk us out of it multiple times. But like, you just naturally don't have the skills to be in a serious relationship in your early 20s. I love Tony. I'm very grateful for the things we've been through, but like, damn, that was not fun at all.
Well, and I think that that's what's so hard when you really look at it. Like, Wally and I have challenges today that are a result of us being together young and not having the skills or the family or the support to deal with our bullshit. Like, we started our relationship when I was 17, and within 6 months, I was raped and he was passed out next to me. Like, I have so much trauma tied to that scenario. He had no idea how to process it. I had no idea how to process it. Our family was basically just like, yeah, this is really bad that this happened. We're not going to talk about it, or we're just going to like be like, this is super fucked up, but like, that's it. And that's not something that you can just glazed
Bounce
over in a
back from.
relationship.
Mhm.
And I think it's like crucial that like you understand that like every relationship has challenges. There are normal challenges, there's traumatic challenges, there's some that are just like, what the hell, how did this happen? Like there's chance challenges that will come your way that you don't understand why they're happening, but every single person is facing them. If you think that
Mhm.
people online aren't facing them, they're just not showing it, and you just don't actually know them. Like it's
Mhm.
literally impossible for them to not have them. But I think it's like you don't realize going into a relationship and not healing or not healing past traumas or situations or understanding who you are as individual people, it will set you up for failure. It will set you up for the hardest times of your whole entire life, and you will not understand it. You will just be like, why is this so hard and this sucks? And you will look for every escape that you can. And the way that like you do that is sometimes really terrible. It can be through
Mhm.
alcohol, it can be through drugs, it can be through infidelity, it can be through like abuse and like beating people or emotional abuse or mental abuse. Like it's pretty bad, honestly, if you think about it. Like the things that we do as human beings because we don't understand what's happened to us in our past. And I think that's what's like the hardest part about a relationship with a partner or a spouse because it's like you're in it. You have made a house together and kids together, and you combined your finances. And then what? Like, how do you get rid of
Mhm.
that? Or they support you financially. Like,
Yep.
then what? I think that's what puts people in these bad situations where they're just like you and Tony, you're probably like, well, we're here now. We like each other. We love each other. But like, you guys were so young and had no idea what you were doing.
Yeah, and I mentioned it in my episode about my affair. I never stopped loving Tony. Like, this isn't about love at the end of the day because the entire time I still loved Tony. But you I had no idea how to have these real problems that we were having at 20 years old. House payments, car payments, trying to have a baby, me not getting pregnant, me having all this trauma with my dad, me leaving the church, never dealing with those feelings. Like there was so much that all of a sudden just compounded on. Thumbs up. So much that just compounded on that it's like, how can you have a healthy relationship in the middle of that? How can you ever have a healthy relationship? Because every relationship is going to have problems throughout your life. It's an ebb and a flow. I think of it like an ocean wave that sometimes it's really hard and sometimes it's really easy and great. I constantly have people telling me, you and Tony are so perfect. You guys just have the most beautiful love story, which we do. I'm not denying that. I am very happy with him. I think he's the best person on this planet, but that doesn't mean we don't still have freaking problems, because we do, and you always will. And that doesn't mean that some days he doesn't annoy the absolute shit out of me, and I do the same to him. Like, it is what it is. Like, that's what relationships are, and it drives me nuts. And if you are somebody that is listening and you said this, I don't hold it against you, but like, we're not perfect. We never were, we never will be. And what you see on Instagram, like with everybody else, is a highlight reel. I'm not going to post on Instagram when he did something, didn't do the dishes enough days, and then I'm not going to be on Instagram and be like, oh, fuck Tony, he didn't do the dishes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it bothers me when people try to insert themselves in your relationship, good or bad, because you really don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And even if you do know what's happening behind the scenes, you know one side of the story. So it's like you can't, it's like comparing apples to oranges. You can't do it, you know?
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest things that was so helpful for me going to therapy, was just helping me understand how to communicate through these types of things, helping me be able to talk freely without saying it to a friend, saying it to him, and then having the fight or the conversation that comes from it. You know, like one of the biggest things that I don't think people realize is like we didn't come built in with like communication skills. We didn't learn how to communicate with a partner or tell them when we're feeling vulnerable or hurt or sad. We grew up watching relationships around us and we emulate them. If you didn't grow up in a household that had healthy relationships with their like the mom and dad, you're going to have a really hard time in your marriage. It's just the facts. Like I remember when Wally and I started dating and my grandma like found out who he was and who his family was, and she was like, please don't date him. And I was like, you don't even know him. And she was like, broken people always find broken people. And if you do end up staying with him, like you will have a really challenging time in your relationship. Like it's just how it goes. And I remember hearing it being like, you don't even know, like you're just saying that because
But
his
I love
parents
him,
did.
Grandma.
I didn't say that because I didn't use the
I,
L word like that. But I was
I
like, in my
know.
mind, I was like, you're only saying this because I come from parents that had drug and addiction issues, and he comes from parents with drug and addiction issues, and you're worried about the drug and addiction side. Like, that's all I heard. And in my mind, I think about it, and I'm like, and as I've like grown into this relationship with him, there's so many things where I like look at our parenting or our relationship and I have to like stop and not take it personally and think about what his image was that he saw as a kid, what my image was when I was a kid, and understanding like why we don't know how to communicate or why we don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. Like it comes down to what we were taught and what we saw. And if you have the ability to like go to therapy, like it will change your life when it comes to your relationship. And it has to be like a legit therapist. Like you need to go to somebody that has the skills and the resources to talk to you about how to communicate or to learn how you communicate or how you hear things or how you feel when you hear things. If I didn't learn certain parts in therapy, I would I don't know if I'd be able to like have this conversation today, because like Wally and I have been through some shit. Like we have been through so many trenches. It is unreal. And the only thing that like has held strong to me is like I know to his core he is a good person. And this might be me like wanting to be a fixer or helper, but like to his core, he is a good man. And I see so much love in him that's always driven me to be like, we have this. Like I love who that version is, but he also needs to grow into that, and I had to grow. Like I think it's important to understand that like your relationships should grow, your friendships should grow, your family relationship should grow, and your relationship with your husband should grow. Like if it's not growing, you're in a rut, and you'll be in that rut until you guys decide to be either growth mindset or what's the other one,
Fixed.
fixed mindset. But like I remember at one point like sitting in our living room being like, dude, we're in a rut. We go to work, we come home, we do the exact same thing every day. Like we're in a rut and we're both miserable as fuck. Because you will get miserable. And then you reach for outside sources, and that's not great.
Yeah. Something I want to talk about, like back to what you said about what you see growing up. On the other end of the spectrum is something not as extreme as like the alcoholism and all of that, or the drug and addiction. It goes down to something as small as, so here's an example with Tony and I, physical touch. My family did not grow up touching. We didn't hug, we didn't kiss, we didn't do any of that stuff. Like, even saying it out loud, it's like so weird to me to think if my family was to do that, like, it's really, really weird. But anyway, Tony's family is the complete opposite. They always give each other hugs. They always tell each other that they love each other. His mom will always give him a kiss on the cheek. So he grew up seeing this. And like, his mom and dad are very lovey. Like, they always are like touching each other's hands or like touching each other in some way. And like, it was very shell shocking, I would say. The first time I like started spending time with his family, I was like, wow, your parents are like obsessed with each other. And he was like, no, I mean, they're just my parents. And I'm like, my parents don't even watch TV in the same room. Like, my dad will be downstairs, my mom will be upstairs. And I'd be like, that is just so freaking weird to me. And it really came at a head in our future together, Tony and I, that his love language is 100% physical touch. Mine, that is the least thing I care about. Like, I don't need to have that to feel intimate, to feel loved, anything. And it's been really hard for me to find that balance of, and for him to find the balance of, I don't constantly have to be touching him, but like, I could definitely touch him more. Like, if we're watching a show or movie, I can definitely hold his hand. I can lay my head on his shoulder, like something along those lines. That even though it's so weird and foreign to me that he needs that in a relationship, that's what he grew up seeing. I grew up seeing the complete opposite, that I don't need that to feel loved at all. It actually makes me feel more smothered than loved, but that's the complete opposite for him. So it really does like play into what you see growing up, how you are shaped as an adult, because yeah, it's interesting. It's very weird.
No, I'm having the hardest time like keeping myself together because Tony is so touchy, and
Yes.
I think he reserves himself sometimes. Like,
Hmm.
I think for the most part he's pretty reserved about it. I think he's learned like in public to like tone it down, but there's times when he does shit that I'm like sitting there and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, when did they become so like touchy? I remember one time telling Molly, I was like, dude, Tony is like touching Taylor so much that it was hard for me to talk to him at one point because he was just like really into her and I've never seen it before, and it threw me for a loop. And I remember just being like, it was so weird. I felt like I couldn't keep my composure because I was like, who the fuck is this person?
Literally, we
But
went to dinner with Tony's parents last night and they held hands the entire time. Even as we went to Olive Garden, as they were like eating their spaghetti, they were still holding hands. So it is like, yeah, it's a thing. Like, they are very, physical touch is like a big thing in their family.
dang, I think it's interesting also for people. I have so many things that I could say. We're gonna have to cut this into 2 episodes. We're gonna have a friend and
Mhm.
family side and a relationship side. But like, it's interesting that you say that because I have a lot of the same things that happen for me. Like, my grandparents who raised me, my grandpa had a completely separate room. He slept downstairs and my grandma slept upstairs. I saw them kiss one time. And I remember when Wally and I started dating, my grandma told him, like, oh, good luck dating this one. She's Frigid Frida. That's what I call her. That's the nickname I gave her. It's like Clyde's grandpa, Clyde's my grandpa, or Clyde's mom. And she was like the most frigid lady ever. Her name was Frida, and she was frigid, and like Shelby's cold like a fucking refrigerator, is basically what she's getting at. And I remember like hearing her say that and just being like, you don't even know me. You don't even know anything about like what I would want out of a partner. But like, I remember thinking like, you're frigid. Like, I've never once seen you even hug my grandpa or care for him whatsoever. And you're sitting here calling me frigid? Like, I remember being so offended. But as I grew up, and like started really diving into like having a relationship and dealing with my sexual trauma and all these different things, like there's so many pieces that come up for me and Wally both that I'm like, holy crap, like your childhood really frames so many aspects of your life and your relationships, and it's crazy that you have no control over it. I didn't have control over any of those things, and
Mhm.
I now have the ability that I have to learn how to deal with them. I have to learn how to get through them with Wally. And aside from the fact that he also grew up in like a really toxic home life situation, parent situation, he craves physical touch. Like that's his thing. And it helps him feel intimate. Me, I'm a victim of sexual assault. The last thing I want is for anyone to touch me. And so it's like a really hard dynamic. So I think one of the things I've noticed and learned, and maybe this is something that can help somebody, is like understanding where their physical touch or like their whatever it is that they're needing, what their
Mhm.
craving is, and understanding what the underlying issue is. Like for him, that's what helps him feel connected. That's what makes him feel safe. That's what makes him feel like I care about him. Um, which is so crazy because he didn't grow up watching a bunch of physical touch. He needs that to feel secure in a relationship. It's like a insecurity rather than like oh, I just watched this and this is what's normal.
Mhm.
And I think that's so crazy when you really think about it. Like, it doesn't matter what you saw. Sometimes someone just needs something. Sometimes someone just has this need that makes them feel close to you. I don't know why. Never really
Mhm.
actually asked him, like, why does this make you feel like I love you? I should
Mhm.
probably ask that. My therapist would tell me to. But I don't know, it's just crazy when you really like look at where these types of things come from when it comes to communication, how they communicate. There's been times where Wally and I have conversations and he like if a kid enters the room, he stops. He's and it's like a real conversation. And I have to be like, we can have this conversation in front of our children. And he will like just clench. He will not have the conversation. And I keep telling him like I need our kids to see that these are normal problems for adults to talk about because we grew
Mhm.
up where people don't talk about their issues in front of their kids. And I need Henley and Jaden both to know that like it's okay to argue about money. It's okay to argue that he's upset that I'm busy and he wants attention. Like I need them to see this, and he does not like that part. He cannot.
I think that that's a really important thing to kind of dive into is these are conversations that need to be had in your relationship on why they need that or why they don't need that. Tony and I have had these conversations in couples therapy. I think that couples therapy is honestly, I would argue the fact that it is a need in relationships because you learn so much about the other person. And these are hard as fuck. And unless you have somebody there mediating it or guiding the direction of where it's going to go, it's very, very hard to have them like at home, like over dinner or something.
Mm-hmm.
But really knowing your partner's their love language, I think is very important, and B, how they communicate and why they need certain things and why they don't need certain things, and how I think that relationships are such a give and take thing. And even though I'm not big on physical touch, I'm willing to give that to Tony at a boundary, at a certain level that I'm comfortable with because I love him. The same as him. He's not going to constantly want me to have sex every day or want me touching him 24/7 because he knows I'm not comfortable with that. So he'll meet me in the middle. But if you don't have these conversations with your partner, you're never going to know what your middle is. And you're never going to know
Yeah.
how much to give and how much to take, and vice versa. You have to have these conversations.
And I would also say, like, I know we say it a million times, but like therapy is your best friend. Like, if
Mhm.
you, especially if you're like, for me, it took me a while to get to therapy. I'll applaud you and Tony. Like, you both jumped in head first when it came to like when you guys really needed it. You took that dive. I also think for me, it was easier for me not to because I'm really hard on myself. It's my Enneagram trait is to be extremely hard on myself, and I live in my brain. I grew up in like a household where I just was on my own and all I had was my own thoughts. And it's really easy for me to break stuff down. I can read people so quickly. I can understand them so quickly. I can understand myself very quickly. And because I was able to like mentally have those conversations with myself and fix a lot of the problems before, it took me a lot longer to go to therapy. Um, it took Wally even longer. He just started, but I think that what's crazy is like if you're not able to have those conversations and you're not able to process what's happening, you have to get into therapy or something like it. Your friend group's not going to fix the problem. Reading a
Mhm.
book's not going to fix the problem. They're short-term fixes. They're not going to solve what really is going on. They're not going to help you understand like the root causes or how to communicate. There's been multiple times in therapy where I feel like most of my therapy comes down to learning how to just have a conversation with somebody because
Mhm.
I don't know how to approach it with this person, like my sister or Wally or work. Like I have to have somebody help me and coach me to understand like this is kind of who they are. how do I have this conversation? I don't want to walk on eggshells. If I don't have the conversation, it's just going to repeat. And I think that's what people don't understand is if you don't start learning how to communicate and receive information and also give communication, you cannot get past these situations. It literally will continue over and over and over again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
One of the things that I think is like crucial in relationships too, and like I think it's uncomfortable for people to talk about, but like intimacy. Wally and I have like a very interesting intimacy dynamic. I'm not ashamed of it. I think when I was growing up in my 20s, you grow up thinking that like you have to have this amazing sex life. And like if you're like talking with your friends and you're not having like regular sex, that like something's wrong. It was like the first thing that people be like, oh my God, you guys don't fuck every day. And it's like, no, we don't. But back in the day, it truly felt that way. It felt like if you weren't like super, what's the word I'm looking for? If you didn't have a healthy sex life in quotation marks, because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Then it wasn't like your relationship wasn't good. And I say healthy in quotation marks is because I don't think people realize how much they use sex to mask something. I've seen people that have like really bad relationships, but sex solves it all. And they'll be toxic, but they'll have sex and everything's amazing and they still love them. I'm sorry, you guys have really big fucking issues that you should deal with, and sex does not fix it.
Yeah.
Or a healthy relationship in quotation marks could be, oh yeah, we're very active sexually, but maybe one of them's forcing it. Maybe they need it every single day and the other person hasn't been able to say, I'm sorry, I actually don't feel comfortable with this, and I feel like you're forcing me to have sex with you, or I feel like I have to have sex with you, or you don't love me. Like, people are not having this conversation enough of like what actual healthy sex looks like. To me, healthy sex looks like people who genuinely want to be intimate together, and maybe sometimes you have to muster up the energy because you need to, but you actually want to. You actually want to give that to that person. And it's not because you're feeling insecure. It's not because you need it to tell you that your relationship is stable. It's because you genuinely love them. And that to me is healthy sex. But I don't think that people really analyze it to that level.
Yeah. I hate when people say, like, this was probably the biggest and only problem I had with Rachel Hollis when her and Dave like had that sex every day. And she was like trying to sell that, like, you need to have sex every day. That's how you'll build your relationship. And in my head, I was like, sex is, it's on my priority list, but it's very far near the bottom as I get older because, and maybe that means there's something wrong with me. I don't know. And Tony feels the same. Like, it's not on our high priority list. And I would say we have a healthy sex life. Do we have it every day? No, absolutely not.
Christmas.
Every Christmas, that's the only time, all day, every day. That's why that's why I love Christmas. No.
Inside joke.
But yeah, like, what does a healthy sex life even mean? And I think that that needs to be something that's discussed with you and your partner. Like, not going to a conference with Rachel Hollis and having her tell you, oh, you guys need to have sex every day because that will build your relationship. Like, I always had a problem with that. And come to find out a year later, they got divorced. So obviously it wasn't helping your relationship that much. You know what I mean? But I totally agree. People use sex as a weapon. They use it as whatever else. And you could be having great sex and absolutely not love the person. I mean, sex is just a physical act. There's way more, at least for me, there's way more that goes into sexual energies and intimacy than the actual act of sex. If I do not feel connected with Tony, I don't want him to touch me. I don't want him to look at me. I don't want any of that. And I don't care. We have great sex and I don't care how good it is. If I'm not feeling that mental connection, I don't want it at all. So there's way more that goes into intimacy for me than just the physical act of having body parts put into other body parts.
And I think that's what's so crazy about it is like, again, every person, every relationship has their own unique situation. Like you could need it, even if you don't necessarily like want it, you could need it because that's what makes you feel connected. But maybe you need to explore a little bit further. What can we do to be connected outside of just putting a dick in a vagina, you know, like
Mhm.
that doesn't solve the problem. If there's something that's requiring that need, it's more like it, especially people that have been victims of sexual assault to some level, like some women, like for me, mine is the opposite. Mine is like, I have to have more than sex. I have to have more intimacy outside of the bedroom. I have to have more. I need to know you love me. I'm safe. I'm comfortable. All of these things. And there's some women that go through sexual assault that they're the opposite. They're chasing it. They only feel valued by having sex. They
Mhm.
feel like that's an only need. And I've been in that space where it's like, to me, my body was just here for somebody to have pleasure. And I still have battles with that. I still go through things like that. But like, it was almost like I needed that to know that I was wanted or I was valued. And that's really fucked up. That's not normal. You should not feel
Mhm.
like, you should never feel like sex is the only way that you matter to somebody. Um, it's okay to be horny as fuck. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
so many other things that go into that. But if it requires like a sexual act, that is like a deeper dive that you really, really, really need to dive into. Um, I think one of the things that's even crazier to me when it comes to this conversation is like people don't want to talk about it. People, I
Mhm.
mean, there's times where Wally and I still don't want to talk about it. And I'll be the first one to say, like, our sex life has gone through so many crazy phases. If we're on vacation, you better believe we're having sex all the time. If our kids aren't there, kids
Ew.
kids can't be there. But like,
We go on vacation with you a lot.
but my kids are always there. If my kids are there, it's impossible for me. It's so hard for me because you never know when they're going to interrupt you. You never know if they're going to hear you. If we're on vacation, we are totally fine. Our sex life is amazing. The problem is I also go through a really weird shame cycle because of my sexual trauma where I suddenly feel really guilty for it. And then there's also the opposite where I got off birth control and I don't want any children. We haven't had sex for over 4 months, I think now, which is a very long time. But I can assure you, our relationship has gone through these flows where it's like 2 months we didn't, 3 months we didn't, 4 months we probably didn't. I don't even know. Like having kids completely changes it. Addictions completely change it. Having a bad relationship that you don't no idea how to handle totally changes it. Like we were constantly in our relationship up and down when it comes to our sex. When he was getting deployed and he was like, I don't know if I'm gonna die, it was like no sex life. It's just crazy. And I think that people feel like that's going to determine the success of their relationship. And it's
Mhm.
not. What it really comes down to is like connect with them, talk to them, figure out what's going on. If you at the end of the day can't, you need to figure out what that means. If you
Mhm.
literally do not want to, there's something bigger there. And Wally and I have gone through that. And I had to say, like, I can't because I'm dealing with a lot of this in therapy right now, dealing with my sexual assault, and it's reminding me of certain things and it's triggering me. And anytime you touch me, I immediately disassociate. And I've just learned about disassociation and I can't do that. And so it's like, and he was supportive. He didn't love it, I'm sure. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
been really hard on him. But I was willing to communicate that. He was willing to receive it. And if you guys can't have that conversation, you really need to look into it a little bit further. Like, if you're either willing to work together and grow together, or you're willing to say we grew up together but it's not working out and we're parting ways, like that's just
Mhm.
really the facts. You have to grow together and continue growing together, or you grow apart and you're done.
And you both have to be willing to go all in.
Yeah.
That I cannot stress that enough. And I think people don't realize, like when Tony and I got back together, it was both of us were 1,010%. It wasn't like he was only 100% and I was at 900%. Like it was, we were both on par of where we needed to be in working on our issues. And if you guys both are not on the same page, which again, it comes down to communication, everything with relationships, especially in a partnership, comes down to communication and over communication. I think in some cases, like there are times that I over communicate with Tony and he's probably like, okay, you can stop. There's times I probably over communicate with Shelby. She called me out last episode and she's
I
probably
did.
like, okay, chill out. Like you can stop. But communication is like such a big thing to me. And when we were in the heights of like getting back together and I was fixing myself from all the guilt and all the things with my affair, like that is what I held on so strongly with, is I'm going to have huge communication with everybody, which that probably is something I could work on, of not over communicating things, but it really is the core of everything with relationships.
I would say communication and being vulnerable and emotional. If you can't have emotions and you can't be vulnerable, and also like all of the, you have to have a foundation, and all of these go into having this foundation. Um, I would say with that too, like if you're going to go through phases, your relationship, like you're gonna rebuild and you're gonna have all these happy things. And then you're also gonna have like these moments where you get back into the swing of regular life and one person stops trying more than the other. And then you both stop trying. And then you're sitting here resenting each other. And in your mind, you're thinking like, God, you're such a fucking lazy piece of shit. Because trust
Mhm.
me, say that shit all the time in my head. And then I have to be like, okay, are you communicating your frustrations? Are you willing to say like, hey, this is bugging me? And not communicating in a derogatory way, not coming up and
Yes.
making a snide comment, but also like taking some time and sitting together and saying, hey, like something's really been bugging me, and approaching it in a way that they can hear you rather than being their mom and being a dick, because it's really, really easy to nitpick. It's really easy to make comments, but I can promise you, they're not hearing you. You're just
Mhm.
venting and getting it off your chest, and then it's not fixing the problem.
Mhm.
One of the things that I think has been really helpful for me in therapy was like learning that I also have communication problems. Like I
Mhm.
know that I feel like I communicate, but I also like know that I don't communicate. And like having the conversation about, hey, well, did you say this to him? And it's like, well, I said this, but I think I need to say this. And like having that open conversation where you can like almost brainstorm about a situation, that has been so helpful for me, because it gave me the space to like say what I said, be able to communicate like how I was feeling and the receive, like how I received information, and then having my therapist kind of like help bring it full circle to where I can like really have the conversation or understand why I'm not having a conversation, was
Mhm.
huge. And you will never fix any of your issues if you don't have those conversations and if you don't have trust. Like when Wally and I don't have trust in our relationship, it's uncomfortable. When Wally and I aren't being emotional in our relationship, it's either insecurity, codependency, or hurt feelings. Those are usually like the three emotions that will like pop up when we're in an unhealthy space. And it's up to us to decide like, okay, we're noticing this. What communication do we need to have to bring it to a better emotional place? Like it all comes down to each of these core things that we're talking about.
Mhm. And again, it goes into how you were communicated with growing up. Inner child, I know Shelby hates it, but it really plays so much into your life. Because growing up, my family was like, we didn't talk about our problems. Like a big blow up would happen, and then we would go to sleep, and the next day we'd wake up and literally be best friends again, act like nothing ever happened. And so, and just completely ignore it. But underneath the surface, all those hurt feelings were there. So then the next blow up, all of a sudden we're bringing up something that happened 5 months ago. And it's like, why are you still hung up on this? Like, I thought we moved past this. And so when Tony and I got together, I did the same thing. We would get in huge fights. I would either leave the house or I would go into the bedroom. He would sleep on the couch. And then the next morning I would wake up and be like, okay, so what do you want for breakfast? And he'd be like, so we're not going to talk about what happened? And I was like, no. Like, what do you mean we're not going to, like, no, we're not going to talk about it. We don't talk about that stuff. And so, but that was how I was taught growing up, is how you dealt with the problem, is you just acted like it didn't happen. And so then each fight would get worse and worse and worse, because had all this stuff that was compounding underneath the surface. And then when it would blow up, it would just explode. But that is definitely something that was learned through childhood. So it is just important to note that there are certain probably unhealthy communication styles that you were subconsciously taught without you even realizing that, like, you were being conditioned to think things are normal.
Well, and I think that that's, God, communication, it just seems like all we're talking about is that. But like, if you really think about it, you have to also understand that like when you talk about communication at its core, It comes down to your body language. It comes down to your tone. It comes down to how somebody's hearing you. So just because you're communicating it does not mean somebody's hearing you. So I think that's one of the things that you have to understand is like your tone is a factor. The environment you're in is a factor. If you're calling somebody out in front of people and they get really uncomfortable about that and they don't feel like comfortable with the fact that you said that in front of people, they're not hearing you. Like you have to understand how people can hear you before you even communicate. I know once I raise my voice or like get really like, let me just lay the fucking facts on you, Wally, because everything you just said to me was dumb as fuck. I know I just broke him. I know that he was vulnerable and he tried to talk to me about something that was making him really stressed. And then I like was irritated or I didn't feel like I had the time to like sit here and be his therapist. So I just break it down, cut and dried. And that always ruins it for us because I'm like, okay, you're taking way too long to get to the point. Let me tell you exactly what the fuck is going on. The hard facts and no emotions because I take emotions out of every conversation. And that's why sometimes I can be very extreme and very rigid because it's like, to me, the emotions, in my brain, people should be able to understand an emotion and a conversation and they're like two separate things. That's how I like feel and hear things. And I have to remember that that's not what other people go through, but I had to learn that he can't hear me or he can't communicate this way or this is how I need to speak to him if I want to get something through. And if you don't understand how your partner communicates or they don't understand, those are the conversations you have to have. And maybe it's in couples therapy, and maybe it's writing them a letter, or maybe it's just having that intimate conversation and just say, like, I remember recently I just said to Wally, I said, it would be a huge turn on for me if you actually went to therapy and dealt with like the shit that I've been asking you to deal with. Like, I know that you think it's bullshit that I like live this woo-woo life, but like for me, I'm a grower and you can sit here and like continue down this path. For me, I need you to show up by going to therapy. And he went to therapy because we are in this together. But if you're a person and you're asking them to do these things and they're not willing to do it, that's a conversation that you have to have of like, this is a boundary for me. This is a requirement. And I need this out of our relationship. And if they're not willing to do that, you have to decide, like, is this relationship actually a two-way street?
Yeah.
Because it
And I
should never be
know,
one way.
yeah, I know us talking about this makes it seem like it's so easy. Couples
It's
therapy
not.
is truly, hands down, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. They are uncomfortable conversations in front of a complete stranger. Their weird eye contact that makes me so uncomfortable. And their drive home, like in the car, not speaking to each other because you're upset about something that they said in there, or you feel dumb or you feel embarrassed. And it's so hard, but it is so worth it. Like, I would take the heart of that any day to have the happiness I have in the relationship with Tony, hands down. But I am telling you that couples therapy is it's not easy. It makes you look at your demons right in the eyeballs and be like, okay, let's deal with this. And a lot of people don't want to do that, myself included. It sucks. I still, to this day, get nightmares before therapy. It happens every day. I have therapy on Wednesdays. Every Tuesday, I have nightmares because it's hard and it's scary. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth it. But I don't want us sitting here making it sound like we're like preaching to you, like, oh, this is so easy, just do it. Like, no, it's not easy at all.
It ain't easy being breezy, and I can assure you it's not fucking butterflies and rainbows over here. We go through so many things in our relationship, and even to this, like literally today, I already know like we are not in a good place. It's easy to get into parenthood traps. It's easy to just be parents. It's easy to just be roommates. And it takes us talking to each other, and it usually takes me, and it's really fucking annoying, but it usually takes me being the first one to approach the conversation. I hate it all the fucking time and I wait way too long because I'm always frustrated, but I'm committed to the situation. And I think that the other side to this coin is like, you need to know your worth and you need to know what you want out of life, and you need to decide, like, do I actually enjoy the life that I'm in, or am I forcing it and I'm miserable And I'm gonna look back once my kids grow up and be like, God, I should have left. I wasted so much time and now I'm 50. You know, like you have to really have these hard looks and make these decisions. You can't get swept up in distracting yourself with friends. You can't get distracted by making yourself super busy all the time that you never have time. There's been times where I valued work people way over my relationship. There's times where like I look at that and I'm like, this was so fucking toxic. I told everything, every problem I had to people I worked with. And I never once communicated it to Wally. I never said, I'm fucking angry at you. I would just sit there and vent and vent and vent because they got it. And if you're doing these things and you're noticing these things, you have to pay attention to that. Like I now know because I've been through it and I've learned, but you have to pay attention to all of these different aspects that are going on. And if there's abuse, you have to learn to like value yourself, know your worth. Like there's mental, physical, and emotional abuse. Like those are all valid reasons to not want to be with somebody. And it only you can decide these things, but like you have to know when to walk away and you have to understand that abuse cycles are real. Like it's not like it's not a fucking thing on the internet for a reason because somebody made it up. It's like you will go through the hearts and flowers stage. You will go through the I'm sorry phase. If people are proving to themselves or to you over and over again who they are, like you have to know, am I okay with this? Am I accepting this or am I done? And it's not easy. You got to deal with your finances, you got to deal with your kids, you got to deal with your job, anything. But it's up to you to decide those things.
Yeah, one thing I want to say with that, if you have children, I don't have kids, so I don't like to speak like a lot about like, oh, if you have kids, but being a child, a an almost adult from divorced parents. My parents divorced when they were 19, and I'm thankful that they stayed together because I love my two sisters more than life, but they were not happy. And now my mom is married to somebody who is so great, who I love so much, and she is so happy. And I wish desperately that she could have had that her whole life because her age that I am right now, she was in a horribly unhappy marriage with 3 kids that she was sticking it out for these kids. And I promise you, your kids will be okay. There's not a reason that you need to stay in an unhappy situation for the kids because your kids can see. And my parents, they were very diligent. They did not fight in front of us. There were definitely nights that I heard them fighting, but it was never like point blank they were fighting in front of us, but they lived very separate lives and they weren't happy. And you could tell that they weren't happy. And I wish that my mom would have the happiness that she had now at my age, because that just seems really sad to me that she didn't have that. So yeah, I just really want to point that out of knowing your worth and knowing that like it's really wonderful if you want to stay together for your kids. It really truly is. And I appreciate that my parents did do that. There are aspects that I do appreciate, but also know your worth and know that if you're not happy and in this complete miserable situation, you don't have to be. It will be harder if you have kids involved for sure. But again, is the hard going to outweigh the discomfort? You know what I mean?
I mean, I think you and I know this because we have been going through a lot of shit for a very long time, but like you will always figure it out. And like people forget, you will always figure it out. The other thing I would say is kids don't fix it. I had a timeline. I was like, I have to be a young mom. I have to have kids. I have to have a career. I have to buy a house. I have to have a husband. I have to have kids. Like this was the agenda. This is what I grew up in this society that like that's what I needed to do. And I was very adamant that if I didn't have a kid by 25, like I was adopting one. I had to have a child. And mine and Wally's relationship was so fucking unwell. We should not have been together. We were so unhealthy. Like the amount of times I was crying myself to sleep, there's not even a number, infinite. And like you don't bring children into that because now I then had to learn how to grow the fuck up really quick. Women will grow up so fast once they have a kid and it will change your relationship on a dime. You will immediately be like, oh, we are not repeating the past. We are not having generational trauma. I mean, that's at least for me. I'm a very strong woman, obviously. Um, but like I was like, no, we are not going down the same path. Like I will not allow what I grew up in or what you grew up in to be our children. Having Jaden was an even bigger moment for me because Henley, I probably would have allowed him to be a little fucker for a long time with Henley growing up. But Jaden came from a super traumatic situation. My brother was very, very traumatic. And I saw Wally repeating things that I was like, absolutely the fuck not. Like Jaden's being seen too much. And I like drew a line. I said, like, you can't be with us if you're going to be this person. And I don't know where that strength came from. I don't know what I was going to do to support us, but I knew what trauma comes from children watching parents go through these things. And I think that sometimes parents think that they're like protecting the children, but all they're doing is teaching the children to get into relationships just like that, to be in a relationship that they think is normal. And it's not because like we said, your childhood literally is shaping you, and we don't think about it enough. And I think that's what's really driven my parenting and driven me to like work on my relationship with Wally so much is because I'm like, this is going to be what Henley and Jaden look for. Like, I have to change it. But also kids don't fix it. So like, trust me when I say, trust me when I say, like, if I could go back, I would have done I'm so happy with where we are. I love it to this day, but do I have regrets? Absolutely. Do I wish it was different sometimes? Absolutely. Do I wish I could do whatever the fuck I want when I want? Absolutely. But I'm also very happy with where I am.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I feel like we've covered so much. I feel like it was so heavy, and yeah, I don't know. Relationships are
mean,
hard.
I think we could talk about it forever. I just want people to know, like, relationships are hard. We are not living in perfect relationships. We come from broken relationships and family and traumas, and so do you, and so does everyone around you. And I know there's some families that look great. I do believe that there are families that like I can see where they grew up in a healthier situation, and there are really great relationships out there and really great families. But trust me when I say they still have fucking problems, and their kids will have problems, and they will go through hardships. Like, we are not on this earth to have perfect lives. We're here, all of us having challenges, and like, just work on yourself, work on your relationship, and learn how to be a better version of yourself, and it will all work out. But like, no one's having a magical life. Like, the princess life doesn't actually
No, it doesn't exist. Yeah, it does not exist at all. It would be nice
We
if
have
it did, though.
we had a million things that we probably should have covered still. Questions that we had to answer. I think we probably touched on them to a certain degree. Do we have an asking for a friend?
Let me pull it back up and see if we answered it, because we may have
I
answered
feel like
it.
I think we might have. I don't know. I know that I'm very direct and bold in these conversations, but again, trust me when I say like a bitch is struggling over here all the time, and so is Taylor, and we cry and we get angry, and it's okay. But find your people. Like, if I didn't have Taylor to talk to, I don't know where I would be. Like,
Same.
I don't think we talk about these types of things all the time, really, but like, we both get it. We both understand that like this is just relationships, and we're not judging each other for it. And when we need to vent, we vent, and we're done. And we don't hate the other person's spouse. Like, you need to find a safe space, whether it's a therapist, a friend. Do not ever go to somebody at work for these things. Trust me, I know. Like, that is not a safe space.
Yeah.
And or like a male friend, if you're a female, like, do
Bad
not vent.
idea.
Do not
Yeah.
vent to a male friend.
And
Like,
vice
they are
versa,
not.
even if you're a male,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's not safe to do it with the opposite sex.
I mean, Wally and I have had this conversation. I literally said to him the other day, it's like, you honestly think that like when we're in our, like our worst parts of our relationship, if a girl at work was like giving you attention and you were able to talk to her and she was making you feel like happy and comfortable and all these things, that you wouldn't start like not realizing that something that you'd crossed a line? He was like, yeah, now that you phrased it that way, you're right. I was like, exactly. It can happen to anybody.
It happens a
And
lot faster than you think, too.
I mean, and like, also, if you're, there's a lot of swingers here in Utah. Sorry again to go off topic and like keep the conversation going, but like, if you're searching for something outside of your house, outside of your bedroom, or you have this need, this feeling where someone's making you feel a certain way, or you feel like you guys need to spice it up in the bedroom by adding another person, either you're just in an open relationship or you're in a bad relationship and you guys are escaping reality. Like, look at Taylor, Frankie, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, these things are just not normal. You either want to be committed to one person or you do not. And those are just the facts. And it's okay if you don't. But you
Yeah.
both need to decide that you're not, or you need to just not be together.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why I said wow. That like literally, I'm just thinking of swingers. I
God,
just found out that there's a huge swinging community in Cache Valley, and I just still can't get over it. And many people that I know are in this community, so it's just very strange.
you know
Like I
them?
used to go to the gym with them.
Oh,
Like not
okay.
any of my like direct friends, but yeah, it's just very wow. It's so just swinging is such a weird concept to me. I could go off on a huge tangent. I won't. It's just like so weird to me.
Honestly, we should have an episode about it in general because I think it's so fucking wild to me how big it is here in Utah. I remember us both being like, we gotta figure out how to get Taylor Frankie Paul on the podcast. Like, I would have loved to just pick her brain.
I just
And
have so many questions.
when I talk about these things and like I'm definitely judging them to a certain degree, but I'm mostly curious. I just want to ask people questions about them. I'm not trying to be rude and offensive. Like, I actually listened to Rachel Hollis podcast the other day and she was interviewing Crystal Hefner, I think is her name,
I just
his
read her
wife.
book. Yeah.
And she like Rachel kept like being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry for that reaction. Like, I'm not judging you. And I think that all the time about myself where I'm like, oh my God, I'm fucking obsessed and fascinated by this. I have so many questions. Also, I'm judging you slightly, but like, what the fuck? It's because I'm naive and also like so curious and fascinated, but I'm also like, what the fuck? So I'm not
Well,
trying
we're
to be a
also
dick.
from Utah, and Utah is such a weird place that I feel like we're
Yeah,
kind of like a different breed from the rest of the world. Maybe swinging is completely normal in other places, and it's just so shocking here because of like the religion aspect. And like that was, we were taught that that was so inappropriate growing up, but like, I don't know, Utah's just a whole different breed. So maybe it's normal in other states and we're just assholes, but truly,
it's
Utah's just really
shocking.
weird. Yeah, Utah's
I
just really
mean,
weird.
it's super shocking, but also like if you think about it, just like I was saying with the whole like if you feel like you need to go outside the bedroom or someone's giving you attention and you're into it, like you really like it all comes back to like yourself, your relationship, like to its core. These people that are swingers, there's something down there deep rooted that you know is like they just haven't gotten to it and they're accepting it for what it is and they're like, oh yeah, this is fun, exciting, I'm into it. Or they just want to be in an open relationship. There are some people like that, but if you're in a committed relationship and something outside of it starts to approach, like until you fix what is happening in your relationship, this will continue to happen. I cannot say that enough. Like, trust me, been there, done that. Like, you have to understand that, like, if you do not fix the core to your relationship that's causing you to seek outside, like for me, a lot of it came down to my sexual assault. Until I started to really understand that, I had no idea. These triggers coming up, my need for attention, all these different things. And until you decide what you need from your partner and how to communicate that and how to talk about it, you will continue to seek outside validation. And like you went in your episode about you and Tony's affair, like that's exactly what it came down to, you know, like you had to really dive into like the core problems in your relationship.
Yeah. There's a reason why the saying once a cheater, always a cheater is a thing, because honestly, if I'm being completely honest, it's easier to continue to cheat than it is to fix your problems. But is it worth it? No. You're going to be set up for a life of misery if you stay down that road. So it's worth it to do the hard work to fix things so that you're not in that toxic cycle.
Yeah. I agree.
And the last thing I want to say about it's going to cross it over with friends and relationships. To be a good friend and to support your friend and to love your friend and whatever else. If Shelby, for example, uses me as a safe space to vent about Wally. I'm not going to treat Wally any differently. And I think that's really important to say because I had people in the past that would like treat Tony differently or his friends would treat me differently. Whatever your friend tells you, if you are your friend's safe space, never take that to their partner and take like say make comments or say like stupid shit like whose team are you on or any of that. Like be that safe space, be that good friend, and also respect their relationship as well. Don't let that come in between. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Don't let that come in between their relationship and your guys' relationship.
Yeah, I was just gonna like put those words in your mouth, but also not only friends, family. Like this is a huge thing. Like family cannot, I know it's so easy when it's family, like that's my sister, like you can't treat her like that, blah blah blah. Like it is so easy for family to be like treating somebody else different. Again, nobody lives in your house besides you and your spouse or your partner. Like you guys know the whole story, the two of you. Your family or your friend are usually only getting one side. And as a family member, like my sister, I don't know if she listens to this podcast. Sorry if I called you out, but like my sister all the time, still to this day, holds like she's like, I don't like how Wally treated you, and like I just can't get past that, and like I'll never be close to him. And I'm all the time like, can we talk about the fucking shit you've done to him or the things you've done to me? Like, but she, because she has some stuff that she needs to work on, she will always use that as a reason to have hate for him instead of seeing the good. And she's letting it make it an uncomfortable space for both of us because she's angry about something that I don't even know if I told her or she just watched happen. I have no idea because I don't give a fuck to ask, to be honest, because it's none of her business. But every time she says that, I'm just like, okay, whatever you say, but like it does draw a line, and your family also cannot, your family doesn't have, it doesn't give them permission to be a dick to somebody else.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know where to go from that. This is gonna be 2 episodes for sure. So
yeah,
sorry.
it's
Thanks
so
for hanging
long.
out with
It's been
us.
like 2 hours. I think more
Aw.
actually. Yeah, I think that we answered the asking for a friend. It was about how to figure out your partner's communication style and their love language. There is a book about love languages, but I
A
think
test.
honestly, yeah, there's a test online. Honestly, I think that if you guys have a hard time sitting down and having the conversation, it needs to be done in a couples therapy office.
Yeah. I'd also like Wally and I don't go to couples therapy, but like I am at a point where I'm like, okay, we probably should start doing this. I also was very stubborn and I was not willing to go to couples therapy because he really wanted to for a long time until I wasn't willing to go until he started doing more of his own personal work. And that's what I wanted to like highlight really quick is like you both need to be working on yourself. You both need your own identities. You both need to be growing. I see a lot where one person's growing and the other person's stuck, and that comes down to like you're either in it or you're not. And if you're in it, you both got to start growing, and you have to push them. Like men are just unwilling to sometimes, and you have to have your boundary. You have to know your worth. You have to have respect. Um, and I would just say with like the communication thing too, like if you can't communicate to them, you have to get into therapy or something. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to blow up. So I don't know. Therapy, I guess, is like a really big
The
savior.
answer to all problems.
I mean, you should prioritize it for sure.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, you guys, just lit some sage to just cleanse that because that was a heavy conversation. But thank you guys so much for listening. Please share this with a friend if you feel like it resonated with you. If you feel like a friend needs to hear it, please make sure that you share it and like, rate, review, follow us on Instagram. And we will talk to you guys next week for a little bit more fun of an episode.
Yes, it has to be a better episode.
I was waiting for you to say bye like you do. Bye.